Earlier this year, I had a chance to attend a talk between Adam Silver, who's the commissioner of the NBA, and Nate Silver, who's a journalist, normally works in politics. And while there was a ton of interesting stuff there that actually really applies to esports, one of the interesting things that Adam Silver said, and I forget if this was him just directly saying it or quoting someone who previously worked at the NBA, but he said that salary caps are not meant to protect teams from players, but rather that salary caps are meant to protect teams from themselves. I remember this quote very, very well. I'm going to tell you why in a second it stuck with me and why I actually think now is the time to start considering salary caps in NA LCS. But first, I want to apologize for the production of this video. Once more, I am traveling. I have a very janky setup to make sure this works, so apologies for it. Also, I am in the UK, and I can't figure out how to get the air conditioning working in this room. The heater working in this room. So you can kind of imagine how terrified I am of the type of person that I'm becoming as I'm sitting here with my jacket on in the UK ranting about esports. It's a terrifying person to become. And then finally, I want to, before we get into the video, just give a shout out to my support page, which is traviscaffrey.com/support. If you guys want me to keep doing these videos and not end up working at a team next year or something else, it would be really great if you can help me support myself and get this thing going. Now let's get into it. So I think it's very funny that I'm doing this video because a couple of years ago, I think it was literally 2, esports moves so quickly it's hard to tell, I did a video right around the same time of year, I think in December, talking about how I thought salaries should become public. And I actually still really believe that salaries should be public. Specifically player salaries in NA LCS and maybe esports more broadly. And at the time, though, one of my big reasons why I said that this should be the case is that players don't have any power in their relationship with team owners and teams. And I really felt as though some of the teams were underpaying some of their players, or rather the players did not have the negotiating capacity and the resources that they need in order to actually negotiate these deals, right? So it was important in my mind for salaries to become public. And I still agree with that sentiment. I still think that's the case because even next year when salaries are going to start going crazy, I do think you'll see instances where some players who do not know what other players in their role are making will be unable to negotiate for the terms that they should be able to. So you might have somebody who is not nearly as good as some of the top players making twice what some of the top players are because the top players don't know how to negotiate with their current team. So I do think that that should be the case. However, what has changed dramatically since I did this video is that players are no longer, I think, getting dramatically underpaid. And I do think that the power has shifted to the players. And there's a lot of different reasons for this, but let's dive in. One thing is, and maybe the biggest thing, is all the capital coming in space. Venture capital or the non-endemic sports teams that are coming in, etc. All these guys are here to prove themselves, to try to figure something out, to try to show that they are the best, and they got to show results, right? If you are, one of these non-endemic sports teams and you have invested in and you just go into 10th place for the first 2 years, the first 2 splits even, maybe even the first split, it's not a good look for you. You become kind of a joke to the audience, and people who are spending money on this thing are going to start looking at their GMs and saying, why are you giving me this trash roster? What's the problem here? Why can't we show results? Blah, 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 right? So there's immense pressure for these guys to show results, which also means that they need to have a great roster, which means a lot of them are willing to pay top talent. Now, top price for talent. It's 1 a.m. here. I'm jet lagged to hell. Either way, so you have this instance where you have the situation where a lot of people are starting to spend a lot of money on players, right? I think we've all heard the rumor that Reignover was somehow making like $700K, $800K, was the highest paid player last year. I've heard other rumors that some of the players on Dig were around that, if not higher. Now, that's kind of crazy, right? And what I've also heard is that there's a chance that we might have even more players hitting that area in 2018. Now, a lot of you guys are saying, that's great. That's great. I love these players. They deserve to be rock stars. They go all over the world. the top players compete on stages in front of millions of people. Of course, they deserve to be making a ton of money, right? And overall, I agree with you. The problem is we're going to go back to the same thing that I've harped on so many times in videos recently that nobody really talks about, and I know people start to think I'm just like a crazy person, but that word is sustainability, right? I do think that esports is getting pretty inflated in terms of the valuations of everything from players to teams to startups to whatever, and that is not a good thing at all. Even if we don't enter into some sort of economic recession in the next couple of years, which who knows, the world is in a very unstable place right now. Even in a world where everything stays stable, at a certain point in time, everyone's going to start to want to make their money back, and they're going to say, I paid $13 million for this LCS team. Because remember, that's what it costs to get into the LCS unless you are an existing team or acquiring a different one, right? So the supposed 4 teams that are getting into the LCS, they're paying $13 million to get in. I want you guys to understand that there is a very long road ahead of them before they can make back that $13 million, right? Even break even. And a lot of times investors want to see, multiples of profit coming out of that, right? So they don't want to just break even. People want to show that they made 50 million off this deal or 100 million or whatever, however many years, right? They really want to see exponential results. And right now, the money is not there. And this goes back to another frustration that I have, which is that there's no transparency in this industry in terms of the costs and salaries and sponsorships and all this kind of stuff, right? Only recently has Riot basically been forced to, because obviously it would have come out, talked about the numbers that they're looking for, right? Which is the 10 million, the 3 million here, etc. But everything else is pretty much shrouded in darkness. But I can tell you guys that these teams are not making very much money. Think about the amount of teams in the LCS last year that had like no sponsors, or maybe 1 or 2 sponsors. And oftentimes those sponsors were not very, they were endemic sponsors, probably have very small marketing budgets, etc. So what is very true, I believe, is very true, is that you have a lot of teams that are spending more money on just paying their 5 players. And oftentimes, remember, there's subs, you have to pay for coaches, etc. But just the 5 players, they probably are not even making back the money that they're spending on the 5 players. So we start to get into an issue here where you start having teams that are spending 13 million to get into the LCS, and then let's say they are spending 2.5 million, 3 million, 5 million on the salaries for their players. They now have to field 5 other players. Remember, because now everybody has to have 10. You have to pay for coaches and analysts. You have to pay not just their salaries, but there's an expectation that you're going to have a team house. People are getting offices. You pay for food in a lot of cases. A lot of players and teams just supply food. You have to pay consulting fees for sports psychologists or psychiatrists or whatever other psycho people that need to come in and help your team succeed. This money is going to start adding up. And if you're going to have a hard time making 13 million back for this investment, you're going to have a lot more of a struggle making all this additional money after the fact. Now, again, there are reasons to believe that revenue should start going up for NA LCS. Now, there's going to be rev sharing. There's this BAMTech deal. Remember, MLB Advanced Media signed this deal with Riot Games about a year ago. We haven't really heard anything about that, right? So it's probably not doing too much on the financial front by, the T-Mobile stuff and all that kind of thing. But it's unlikely that Riot is even making money directly other than the marketing thing, or rather, obviously a lot of people point out that they make money off of just the fact that this is an advertisement for Riot and League of Legends, but their money from these advertisers might not even be paying back. The bird's nest is expensive, and flying a bunch of musical acts over is expensive, and a giant fake dragon is expensive. So, going back to the age-old rant for me over the last couple months, nobody's making money. And salaries are going up and up and up. And of course they're going up because if you just spent 13 million, you have to prove that you can do this. And unfortunately, the no one is able to really talk about this openly. No one is incentivized to talk about this openly and how much money they're losing, because if they do, the valuations of all their teams are going down. You know, imagine you're an NA LCS team owner and you've been around for a while, and you know you need to raise money to get into League of Legends. Maybe you want to get into Overwatch League, if not this season, then next. You have to be able to raise funds. You know that you've spent years of your life creating this team and worked ridiculous hours and flown all over the world to make sure that, you know, not just your League of Legends team, but your other esports teams succeed. People start coming in and offering you, you know, we think your company's worth 30 million, 50 million, 100 million, who knows what. Are you really going to go, well, I'm going to go out there and start telling everybody that esports is just losing tons of money and everyone's bleeding out or whatever? No one wants to talk about this because it'll make the valuations of their teams go down. So, you know, there's a whole other video that I could do just about the bubble thing. The nice thing is hopefully team owners won't get angry with me for saying this, because none of their investors are watching my YouTube channel anyway. But my point is, we are not in a sustainable ecosystem, and player salaries are just going to start ballooning. I've already heard rumors that they are for next year, and this is not good. Now, this is not good, not just for the team owners. It's not good for the fans or for Riot, because if everybody starts pulling out because they're losing a ton of money, what do you think happens to the LCS? We go back to basically like 2013, 2014. You want to go back to a studio that doesn't have an audience? Do you want to go back to possibly, you know, if things get really bad, back to online tournaments? Maybe some of you do, because some of you don't like the LCS, I don't know. But I don't think it'd be a good thing. And players should not be happy about this, because, again, while they might be making bank right now, they are probably not going to be making bank in a couple of years if all these guys disappear. But if they have a long-term vision of this stuff, this is a bit of the problem, because players are very, very unlikely to ever have long-term thinking about stuff. You know, it's very much like, what am I going to do this year? And for some of these players, they don't know how long they're going to keep playing, right? But it is important that the players realize that they have a chance here to play for the next 5 or 10 years. And by the way, not just play as a player, but perhaps become a coach or an analyst or an influencer with one of these teams. It is in everyone's best interest for everyone to start breaking even and then eventually making money. So even the players that are making a ton of money, they should not, you know, they should have a vested interest in making sure that this continues. And that is why I think it is in everyone's best interest to step back and really consider if there should be a salary cap. Now, for those of you in Europe, I know that there are very few instances of salary caps, but in North America it's very, very common. For those of you that don't know, a salary cap is simply, you know, it depends on the league, but oftentimes you can spend only this amount of money on your entire team salaries, you know, or you can only spend up to this amount on a player. And so this has several different effects. One is it helps keeps the cost down of the team and make sure that they're able to show profit. Another thing is it prevents one team from just buying all the best talent because they've decided to just lose money for 5 years and create a dynasty, or, you know, win everything because you can just buy everything and you don't care. You're going to spend all the money. So it also creates a sense of competitiveness between all the different teams, because theoretically they're all working with up to the same amount of resources. This is very common in North America. And I do think that and by the way, if you are a European fan, I should point out that this would benefit you, because NA teams would no longer have, you know, seemingly limitless funds to just poach all your players from your league. You know, they have to suddenly decide, do they want to pay for the best North American mid laner, maybe the only North American mid laner, and that'll be, you know, maybe expensive, but maybe a little bit less than recruiting top EU talent or whatever. You know, basically there's less money for them to spend, which is probably good for you because they're spending a lot of money trying to get all your talent. So if you're a European fan, you should be a fan of this idea. And then I think, again, kind of going back to what I was saying, I do think it just makes sense for the Players Association, which is, I know, still kind of in its raw elements, Riot, and the team owners to at least have this conversation if they have not already, and look at the numbers, start to have an understanding of what salaries are looking like they're going to be next year, and really sit down at a table and say, and again, bring the Players Association in there as well so that the players aren't getting screwed, and start to say, let's model this out. How much money do we think we're going to make next year? The year after that? How much money do we think we're going to spend? What are these player salaries looking like? Is there a path to profitability underneath these terms and this current situation? Or should we consider creating a salary cap so that the teams aren't incentivized to just throw a ton of money and basically burn themselves out? So anyway, that's my take on salary caps and sort of my consideration around the stuff. You'll notice I did not name this video NA LCS should have salary caps. I said, should NA LCS have salary caps? And that's because I think for the first time in NA LCS history, possibly in esports history, it's maybe worth at least having the conversation. Hope you enjoyed the content. Again, you can check me out right here on my YouTube channel. If you haven't, please subscribe. And be sure to consider, because again, I don't have a salary that can be capped. I don't have a salary at all. Supporting me over at travisgafford.com/support. Thanks for watching.